Now we'll discuss about the concept of sovereignty. The very English term sovereignty is derived from the French term sovereign and from the Latin term supranas. The very term sovereignty is a kind of supreme authority or supreme power which lies in state. In the ancient period, Aristotle in his Polities expressed that sovereignty is a supreme power of the state. Even in Rome, Justinian in his Institutes and Augustus maintained that during the Roman Empire, the legislative authority to make law always was in the hand of people of Rome. So, in Roman Empire, the people of Rome were the sovereign. The same maintenance of sovereignty and its existence continued during the feudal period. And during feudal period, the feudal kings were considered as the sovereign authority. In medieval time, the Pope, the Roman Pope, was considered as sovereign, and Christian authorities or Christian fathers, they consider Pope as the supreme authority. But during 16th century, the very modern concept of state was developed, and that modern concept of state was developed by the Italian philosopher and diplomat Niccolo Machiavelli in his work Prince, where Machiavelli expressed that politics was purely a secular science. So in this way, he rejected the very authority of church, and he subjected everyone under a ruler, and that ruler of the state owed no duty to anyone in his external relation, and that prince or ruler in this state has no legal limitations. So, for the first time, we found there is a secular attempt regarding defining the state's supreme authority, and that is the sovereignty. And this process continued with Renaissance and Reformation up to 17th and 18th century in Europe. And finally, Bodin or Bodin in his Republic provided a definite theory of sovereignty. And in that definite theory of sovereignty, he defined it that it is the supreme power over citizens and subjects. So, sovereignty in the sense of Bodin is a supreme power over citizens and subjects of a state, and that is unrestrained by law. And that authority is a kind of authority which is perpetual, undelegated, and inalienable. But that supreme power or sovereign power is only subject to natural law, and the ruler or the sovereign is only answerable to God, and the law of the land is considered as the command of the sovereign. So this is an internal aspect of sovereignty which is explained by Buddha while defining sovereignty in his Republic. But subsequently, the French political philosopher described the external aspect of sovereignty. And by describing the external aspect of sovereignty here, Grotius explained that the sovereign power is not limited to only internal activities, but also a state is having external supreme power over and all its territories, their integrity and its independence from external aggression or invasion from other states or other nations. So this is how the external aspect of sovereignty was explained by the French philosopher Grotius. And subsequently in England, Thomas Hobbes, in his work Leviathan, described sovereign as a sea monster, and that sea monster or the sovereign in a state enjoys supreme power, and that supreme power to monarchies which were functioning during the beginning of modern period in England, and in this way to explain and substantiate his expression of sovereignty, he described about the conditions of subjects or individuals in a state of nature, where, according to Hobbes, life of man was solitary, nasty, brutish, poor, and short. So there was a kind of revolutionary change in the state of nature to protect natural rights and to maintain and to protect that natural rights. All these subjects living in a state of nature, they entered into a contract with the sovereign, where they discarded their all rights to live in peace and prosperity, that the security would be provided by that sovereign with whom they have entered into a contract. But the subjects here had lost all their resistance power, so they could not resist, or there was no resistance, no revolt against that sovereign authority which they have created out of that contract. So, this is a kind of explanation of the legal concept of sovereignty by Hobbes. After Hobbes, it was Locke, Thomas John Locke, who, in his two treatises of government, in the same way expressed about state of nature, natural rights, and all these subjects entering into a contract with the sovereign for establishment of peace, tranquility, safety, and security in the society, and for establishment of a civil society which would provide protection to their life, liberty, and property. But the sovereign created out of that contract is limited in its function, as when the sovereign will function against the whims or wishes of the subjects had the power to revolt against the sovereign, so also they can overthrow that sovereign out of power. So this is a kind of explanation of the political sovereign or political sovereignty by John Locke. After John Locke, the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in his social contract, also examined in the same way the state of nature, natural rights, and all these subjects entering into a contract to form a sovereign authority, where Rousseau explained that all these subjects, they entered into a social contract among themselves, and they themselves ruled over the society, and by their own will and by their own law they established the civil society. And in this way Rousseau here explained about the concept of popular sovereignty. Besides that, another important English jurist, Jeremy Bentham, described that sovereignty is a number of persons are supposed to be in habit of paying obedience to a person or an assemblage of persons. That means when a number of persons or subjects, they paid their habitual obedience to either a single person or an assemblage of persons or a number of persons, that is the sovereignty. So here Bentham described about divided and partial sovereignty, because laws should conform to the theory of utility according to Bentham. In his principle of utility or theory of utility, he expressed about the very concept of pain and pleasure, and when he describing about pain and pleasure, Here he expressed that every sovereign is bound to increase pleasures and minimize pain of the subjects or individual. So the laws made by sovereign, the main purpose is to reduce pain and to maximum pleasure. That's why it is considered as limited or divided or partial sovereignty. But his disciple, another jurist, John Austin, while describing about the nature of sovereignty, he defined it that if a determinate human superior, not in habit of obedience to a like superior, received habitual obedience from the backup given society, that determinate superior is sovereign in that society. So here Austin clearly expressed that person who or body enjoying habitual obedience from all his subjects, but he is not paying obedience to any other authority, that is sovereign. So here he describes about two marks of sovereignty. One is the positive mark and the second one is the negative mark. While expressing positive mark, he expressed about the subjects or individuals of a state paying habitual obedience to the sovereign authority. And when it is the question of negative mark of or negative aspect of the sovereignty authority is not in habit of paying obedience to a like superior authority. So here the very definition and explanation regarding the concept of sovereignty by John Austin expresses that sovereignty is a indivisible and it is unlimited. It is absolute. So this is a kind of explanation of legal sovereignty by Austin.